everybody. Mark Levin here. Our number, 877-381-3811. 877-381-3811. I want to read to you these hysterical headlines. If you want to see hysterical headlines, you go to Mediaite.com. They're filled with left-wing hysterical headlines. This is Dan Abrams' site. Former prosecutor Don Jr. and others should be having a nervous night tonight. Let's see. Rachel Maddow. Today's a very ominous moment for the White House. Let's see. More. Katie Tur. Michael Cohen could be the most terrifying, destructive person for Trump. Now, they know nothing, but they keep putting this stuff out. Leon Panetta. Cohen's plea tells us Trump was focused on making money over becoming POTUS. Donald Trump Jr. may have nowhere to run to, except his dad, and Michael Cohen's guilty plea. CNN's Gloria Borger. Cohen's gone from willing to take a bullet for Trump to pointing the gun at him. Now, ladies and gentlemen, what does any of this mean? Here's some more headlines. The Associated Press. Michael Cohen pleads guilty to lying to Congress. New York Post. Michael Cohen pleads guilty to lying during Russia probe. ABC News. Michael Cohen pleads guilty to lying to Congress in new deal with Mueller and Trump-Russia probe. Law and Crime, another Dan Abrams outfit. Experts agree Robert Mueller just played Trump like a fiddle. Who are these experts? The Hill. Mueller looking into late-night calls between Trump and Stone. Report. ABC News. Mueller asked Trump about 2016 RNC platform change regarding Ukraine. And it goes on. All these things are being dumped out now. Now, let me talk to you as a real expert. People keep saying, what are the legal implications? For Trump, there are none. Zero. There's no legal implication. There's no legal jeopardy. Period. Moreover, in all this so-called reporting and analysis by these phony experts, where did President Trump collude, coordinate, or conspire with the Russians during the election to fix the result of the election? Where is this evidence? And since there's not a scintilla of evidence, this should underscore the point that this entire investigation is bogus. It was triggered by a coward, Rod Rosenstein, pressured by the Democrats, including Schumer, to appoint a special counsel to criminalize what was a counterintelligence investigation. And now, as we've been talking about a long time, and all of a sudden people go, hey, they're criminalizing politics. Wow. I think we've been saying that for 2 years now. Yes, they're criminalizing politics, but only some of politics, Republican politics. And to see these clown Republicans in Congress run to the defense of Mueller, wanting to protect Mueller despite the violation of the separation clause, separation of powers clause. And moreover, they see that Mueller has completely ignored what's taken place on the Democrat side. All of us know what this is. Cohen can plead guilty to whatever he wants. What's happening here is you have a Soviet-style investigation and oddly enough, a Soviet-style prosecution, where people who never committed crimes all of a sudden are guilty of crimes as a result of a bogus investigation, Mr. Producer. Michael Cohen was a private lawyer to Trump. He wasn't even a serious lawyer. He will be disbarred. He's lied about his taxes. He lied about his loans. He lied about his taxi decals. He lied in his testimony. What's Mueller going to do? Hold him up as a font of wisdom and accuracy? He's trying to take down little players, bit players, non-players, to pile up a report about, wow, look at this. All these people, we have a conspiracy of silence here. All these people who surrounded Trump. It's all bogus. Absolutely bogus. And they keep treating Mueller like he's this wonderful prosecutor, this serious prosecutor. First of all, the guy appears to be delegating most of this to his number two guy, the hatchet man, Andrew Weissman. Andrew Weissman. Now, there is supposed to be some kind of balance and check, ladies and gentlemen, even with prosecutors. Maybe the media, not in this case. The media are cheering for Trump's destruction. Shouldn't they be cheering over the fact that so far all the leaks show that Trump did nothing? Shouldn't they be celebrating that in our republic, the president that we chose is guilty of nothing? That he didn't collaborate, he didn't coordinate, he didn't conspire with the Russians? But they're not. They keep bringing in these phony experts who are utterly predictable. If I were Don Jr., I'd be worried about now. The country should be worried about now. About what's taking place here. The country should be worried. And when you put this in perspective, as we've been doing all week, Hillary Clinton with her emails, 30,000, I think it was 33,000 emails missing, deleted by her lawyers, and otherwise deleted, the destruction of laptops, the destruction of cell phones, immunity given to key material witnesses, a 2-hour interview with Hillary Clinton with no transcript. And then look at this. We're going to get to the bottom of the crime of the century. We got Lieutenant General Flynn. But wait a minute. The FBI said they didn't feel he lied. Well, the new guy's in town, Mueller. And we got this Manafort on tax violations and all these other violations. What the hell does that have to do with anything? Well, we can squeeze the hell out of him. Put him in solitary confinement. Take his 5 homes. Take his suits. Burst into his apartment in the middle of the morning at 6 a.m. That'll get us what we want. But it hasn't. We'll go after this guy, Jerome Corsi, who's a writer. Writes at WorldNet Daily. He appears at InfoWars. He does it. Well, who cares? Or Roger Stone. Roger Stone? Trump dissed Roger Stone in the middle of the campaign. What do they know about it? Well, were they in touch with Assange? No, apparently not. And what if they were? What if they were in touch with Assange, like the media had been in touch with Assange, like the media reported stories from material that Assange had? What if they were? That's not a crime either. So what exactly is the substantive underlying crime here? There never has been one. There isn't one today. So we get these phony analysts who've been wrong day after day, week after week, month after month for almost 2 years. They're wrong. Well, you see, Cohen lied about the Russia deal. So what? That's Cohen's problem. And by the way, you hear the hapless chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, Richard Burr? This demonstrates that you don't lie to Congress. Are you kidding me? James Comey lied to Congress. He wasn't prosecuted. Eric Holder lied to Congress. He wasn't prosecuted. The lady who headed the IRS, or the guy who headed the IRS, he misled Congress. He wasn't prosecuted. You got a whole list of people who've misled and lied to Congress who aren't prosecuted. Why is that? Why is that? Meanwhile, the President of the United States has shown no willingness to give Russia an inch. He's going to the G20 meeting, or he's there, and he's canceled his meeting with Putin. He's armed the Ukrainians, which Obama wouldn't do. He's put sanctions on the inner circle around Putin, which Obama didn't do. He has shown no willingness to cave to the Russians. None. There's nothing here. But it doesn't matter. No. Because the whole purpose here, ladies and gentlemen, we know they're criminalizing politics. If you listen to this program, you've known it for a while, but it's more than that. This is an attack on our electoral system. This is an attack on our constitutional system. Rather than Congress standing up for separation of powers, rather than Congress standing up for the Constitution, Congress wants to protect Mr. Mueller. because they want him to produce a report where then Congress can try to remove the President of the United States. It is diabolical. It is evil. Nothing has changed today. Nothing changed yesterday. Nothing changed last month. Nothing changed 6 months ago. Nothing at all has changed. And in terms of the president being in legal jeopardy, how many more damn times do I have to explain that it is the position of the United States Department of Justice that you cannot indict a sitting president? He's not in any kind of legal jeopardy. I'll be right back. Let me tell you about this guy, Jeff Flake. He sits on the Senate Judiciary Committee, and he will not vote for any judicial nominee to go to the United States Senate floor unless there's a vote to protect Mueller. Now, this is a man who sits on the Senate Judiciary Committee who is a constitutional illiterate and would do further damage to our governing document. To protect Mueller? Moreover, the President of the United States hasn't even threatened to fire Mueller. Who's bothering Mueller? Quite the contrary. The man is utterly out of control. Now, I want you Supreme Court justices to listen to me a second. Just listen to me a second. If you delude yourselves into believing that this prosecutor is no different than any assistant United States attorney, then you're intellectually bankrupt. Intellectually bankrupt. No assistant United States attorney can prepare a report of the kind that this special counsel is going to prepare, that will eventually be forced out of the Department of Justice into the hands of the Democrats and the media as soon as the ink is dry. There's not another prosecutor in the country who can do this, let alone an assistant United States attorney. A United States attorney can't do this. And yet a United States attorney must be nominated by the President and confirmed by the Senate. Mr. Mueller was not nominated by the President or confirmed by the Senate. He wasn't even appointed by the actual Attorney General. He was appointed by an acting Attorney General, the Deputy Attorney General. He was appointed in violation of the Department of Justice regulations. He was appointed despite the fact there was no criminal substantive law at issue. You want to know what medieval times were like? You're looking at it. You want to know what a free press is like? Look 200, 300 years ago. You don't have a free press today. You have a liberal press. And who is it that's standing up for the Constitution today? A relative handful of people. And yet, despite our urging months ago that the Republicans in the House and the Republicans in the Senate call Mr. Mueller for a hearing to determine exactly what his constitutional authority is, what he thinks his constitutional authority is, they've done the opposite. Either sat silently or these rumblings about protecting him. Protecting him. Protecting him from what? Well, the Deputy Attorney General can oversee him, but he's not. Nowhere in our constitutional structure does this exist. You know, I read a piece at National Review Online by Yuval Levin, very bright young man. And he goes back and he cherry picks Mason and Madison for the proposition that, you know, if a president abuses the pardon power and uses the pardon power, and I'm paraphrasing, to really cover his own tuchus, well, then he can be impeached and he ought to be impeached. Well, that's fine as it is. But how about we talk about how we got to this point? How we got to this point. That the President of the United States has nothing to hide. He's trying to defend his administration. Since the moment this man was elected, he has been hounded and hounded and hounded by the very institutions that tried to defeat him during the course of the election. And they're still trying to defeat him. And this is the grave problem, isn't it? All the focus is on Trump. All the focus is on really these minor players, these minor characters. And all the focus has been removed from the unbelievable institutional violations by the top levels of the FBI, by the top levels of our intelligence agencies. How soon we forget that senior FBI officials sent informants, a.k.a. spies, into the Trump campaign. How soon we forget. How soon we forget that the man sitting on the staff of the Deputy Attorney General on the holdover of Sally Yates, appointed by Obama, that he and his wife were working with Fusion GPS and Christopher Steele and that damn phony dossier. How soon we forget the federal judges who still haven't been held to account, who signed off on that FISA warrant and 3 extensions. And even now, they know that what they signed off on was wrong. And they've held nobody in contempt. They haven't held a hearing. They haven't done anything. A complete breakdown of our judicial system, a complete breakdown of our investigative system, and now a complete breakdown of our prosecutorial system. And the media, which are supposed to help us fend off tyranny, are the mouthpieces for tyranny. They're the mouthpieces for tyranny. They seem to think their job is to pile on, to burden this president, to be the press spokesman for an out-of-control prosecutor and an out-of-control prosecutorial team. And when we come back, I'm going to explain to you how Mr. Mueller was played rather than Mr. Mueller doing the playing. It's played by Manafort. I'll be right back. I don't know. I think I'm hanging in here. Number 5, day of the flu. I tell you, it's unbelievable how this thing hangs around. I've got a theory on this, ladies and gentlemen. Maybe I'm all washed up, but every time I get a flu shot, I get the flu, Mr. Producer. Now, is it true that they give you a little bit of the flu in order to try and fend off the flu? Well, I think it works. I think I get the flu, but it doesn't fend off the flu. Every time I get this shot. And so, like, within 4 or 5 days, here I am, suffering through the same damn thing every year. But anyway, during the breaks in the show is when I rehabilitate. This Mueller's not as smart as his media acolytes want you to think. He's really not. Manafort's been running circles around him. Well, what do you mean, Mark? He's been convicted of felonies. I got that. But then he cut a plea deal with respect to charges in Washington, D.C. And now Mueller's furious. Now, why is Mueller furious? Well, because he's been lying to us. So there we go. Mr. Mueller, again, is God on earth, and he's the judge, and he gets to decide. No. What's happened here is Manafort's legal team has been sharing information with the president's legal team, which, of course, is perfectly legitimate. We talked about the joint defense agreement before. You can have an informal agreement, a formal agreement, doesn't much matter. You see, ladies and gentlemen, people who are targeted by the government are not required to lie in a fetal position in the court or the basement and just take whatever they're given. They're allowed to defend themselves. Take a look at our Bill of Rights. I'm sorry. Take a look at due process. Presumption of innocence. The Bill of Rights do not empower the federal government. They protect the individual. And apparently the media do not comprehend this. So, of course, Manafort's lawyers can talk to the president's lawyers, or any of the lawyers they want to. What, only the prosecutor can talk to lawyers in the Southern District of New York and other lawyers all around the country? Defense counsel can't do that? Of course they can. Well, Mark, is he making a play for a pardon? I hope so. Well, then that's obstruction. We get this clown, Mark Warner, who can barely complete sentences. And so pathetic as a Democrat citizenry in Virginia. They elect him governor, they elect him senator. Can't do better than this miscreant. And, well, that would be obstruction. Of course it's not obstruction. Why is it everything the president does or may do or can do under the Constitution obstruction? He can fire Mueller. That's obstruction. He can pardon Manafort. That's obstruction. He can appoint Whitaker as the acting attorney general. That's obstruction. No, it's not. None of it's obstruction. But the mushheads with law degrees, the former federal prosecutors, the former whatever, judges, all on TV, bloviating, burping up their stupidity, and so that people get confused. And of course, no better place to get an objective opinion than to go to Richard Blumenthal of Connecticut or Mark Warner of Virginia or Adam Schiff of Never Neverland. No better place to go than with these left-wing kook Democrats who, if they had their way, as I've said before, they'd hang Trump by his foot on a telephone pole. These people don't believe in the Constitution or the rule of law. They give more deference to illegal aliens trying to get into this country than they do to a duly elected president of the United States. They make more noise about terrorists in Guantanamo Bay and their due process rights, of which they have none, by the way, than the president of the United States, or his kids, or his wife. What you're seeing before you is sort of a medieval prosecution, a medieval mindset, a medieval so-called media. And it is hilarious when CNN and MSNBC and all the others talk about Fox as state media. No, the media are state media. There may be people on Fox who support Trump, and they say they support Trump, and of course there's people on Fox who don't. But state media means they support these institutions. I don't mean the constitutional institutions. I mean these bastardized institutions. The media are cheering for Mueller. They want the president destroyed. Any leak, any little piece of information involving anybody. Incredible. Let's take some calls. May I? I think I may. Darwin, Montrose, Colorado, on the Mark Levin app. Go right ahead, please.
Thanks, Mark. I just wanted to say I think people are overlooking something. I think that Trump is actually hated so much from both sides because he's not a politician. And this is letting the American people know that we don't need politicians to run our country.
Well, that's a good point. Go ahead, sir.
You know, that would actually make both sides want to get rid of him as fast as possible.
All right. Well, that's quite clear, I think. Look, the Karl Rove, let's put it to you this way, Darwin. You've got Barack Obama at the James A. Baker Center at Rice University in Houston. This is Bush world. And he gives a standing ovation with his race-baiting comments, his perversion of American history. They give him a standing ovation. He lies about his role in the production of energy. He lies about his role in economic growth. He's a no-growther. He was anti-fossil fuels. Most of the energy production that took place had to be on private and state land. They couldn't do the production on federal land. Trump opened that up early on in his administration. It's all out there. They're all facts. So this serial liar, Obama, is treated like the second coming. But everything that comes out of Trump's mouth, oh, that's a lie. Like what? He said it was an invasion. He was right. And I can go on down the list. And it's also important to do a list of the media lies. But there is no doubt whatsoever, that the media are cheering for this president to be taken down, and even more, are participating in it. That's why every stupid little move by this prosecutor, Michael Cohen, pled guilty to lying to Congress. That's his problem. Oh, this is a direct line to Trump. No, it's not. Well, Trump Tower, look what happened at Trump Tower. Nothing happened at Trump Tower. We don't know any more today than we knew 2 years ago. All right, thank you for your call, sir. Let's go to Bob, Harrisonburg, Virginia. You're listening on the great WMAL all the way out there, huh?
Yes, sir, absolutely, always.
Yes, go right ahead, my friend.
Absolutely. So I'm just wondering, you say quite correctly often that the Mueller special counsel is unconstitutional. But I just want to know, what the difference is between this current special counsel and the Ken Starr special counsel, and what, if any, special counsels are constitutional?
Well, you raise an excellent point, so don't hang up. And it's this. The Ken Starr appointment was under the independent counsel statute, as it was called. Actually passed by both houses of Congress, signed into law by the president. At the time, I think it was Jimmy Carter. Went all the way to the Supreme Court in a case involving Ted Olson. And the Supreme Court ruled that this particular statute was constitutional, and it gave three basic elements as to why it was constitutional. And the one dissent was Antonin Scalia, who said, there is no place for this in our constitutional structure. There's no place for an independent counsel who's independent of the other branches of government. Now, this special counsel, there is no independent counsel law anymore, was appointed by Department of Justice regulation, not on any statutory basis. And he was appointed in violation of the Department of Justice regulation because there was no criminal basis for his appointment. Rod Rosenstein turned a counterintelligence investigation, which is not a criminal investigation, into a criminal investigation. So Mueller has been trying ever since to claw his way into various criminal charges for various people. But he doesn't even come close to the President of the United States because there was no basis to begin with. Moreover, as I've explained many times, the Appointments Clause of the Constitution. If you have a man this powerful, a position this powerful, unlike any other prosecutor in the United States, bar none, who has this kind of power, this kind of authority, I don't care if he reports to the Deputy Attorney General or not. All assistant United States attorneys all United States attorneys report to the Deputy Attorney General, and they all have to be nominated for their confirmation to the Senate, because that's what the framers of the Constitution wanted. Divided power, not centralized power. And that wasn't done in this case. And every act that Mueller takes, and even those clapping seals in the media and clapping seals in the Democrat caucus and clapping seals among the Flake caucus, even by their own statements about how important he is, how we must protect him because this, that, and the other, they underscore the point that he's different. Have I helped you, sir?
You sure have, and they got to tune into Mark Levin. You're fighting the good fight. Thank you, sir.
All right, brother. Thanks for your call. We'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
Oh, the lady dropped out, who was going to tell us about reading my dad's book in the classroom. All right. Let us go to Mike, Paris, Texas, Sirius Satellite. Go.
Hey, Mark, I was just wondering, how in the world can they find, if they got the FISA warrant under false pretenses, how can they continue an investigation under a false warrant?
Well, this investigation per se is not under that warrant exclusively. So that's how they can do it. But look, here's the bottom line, Mike. If you don't have somebody in charge who's going to fire this guy's ass, then he's going to go on and on and on. And he's going to become more brazen, and he has become more brazen. And they're leaking like hell all week. They're piling on this week. They're trying to create a tornado of resistance against Trump. They're trying to create a tornado of controversy, better put, against Trump. So people who really don't pay attention, Mike, they're going, wow, now look at this guy pled, and this guy pled, and this guy's guilty. And then you'll hear the leftists on TV say, there's been 2,800 people who they've indicted and pled guilty. And not a damn one of them relating to Russia in any direct way.
Right, exactly. But I don't understand how they can turn around and try to, you got Hillary Clinton with her emails and everybody.
I know, it is unbelievable that she can destroy 30,000 emails as Secretary of State, knowing full well what she's doing. The mens rea, as we say, setting up this private server in order to get around federal law, several federal laws. Her lawyers are destroying things. I mean, how come Trump's lawyer, such as he was, Michael Cohen, how come he's in the hot seat, but none of Hillary Clinton's lawyers are in the hot seat? How come Hillary Clinton's top aides, who collaborated with her in her conduct, how come they all got immunity? I mean, we could go on and on and on here. And meanwhile, you have these damn Republicans go, well, let the system work. It's not working. That's the damn point. All right, Mike, thank you for your call, my friend. Debbie, Atlanta, Georgia, the great W-Y-A-Y, go.
It is an honor to speak to the great one, Mark Levin. I have been listening to you since before, just after you started on Rush Limbaugh. Sorry, I'm nervous.
Thank you. And he's my buddy, too. Somebody really reamed him out today. I stand with Brother Rush. Anyway, go right ahead. Yep.
Now, I want to know, and I want to say this. These Democrats would not be doing this unless they had something major that they have done that they do not want to come to light. You know this, right?
Now, you mean this a diversion, these attacks on Trump, in order to cover up their own stuff?
This is also true. Yes, you know this. I know you have to know this because they cannot have this come to light. And there was one other question. This has just been bothering me for days.
Yes.
You remember that?
By the way, are you from Boston?
Came down about the
hold on, Debbie. Are you from Boston?
No, sir. I'm from North Carolina.
No way.
Yes, sir.
I'm just kidding.
My father was from Illinois. He was a Yankee.
Really?
I can't help it.
I'm just kidding you.
No, but
yes.
this judge that came down with this verdict and telling him that the CNN would most likely win if the president took it to court. What fourth grade classroom did they get that bozo from?
Beats me.
Honest to God,
this is the great free press case of the new century. You believe that?
Honest to God, I swear I do not. I really do not. But when somebody needs to dig, and we don't have really any good digging journalists anymore. We don't have any journalists, actually. But somebody needs to dig because it's in there somewhere, and it's close to coming to the surface. I feel it.
All right, my friend. Thank you. Joe, Astoria, New York, the great WABC. Quickly go, my friend.
Hi, Mike. Mark, it's an honor to talk to you. Hannity's right. You truly are the great one. I'd like to go off topic a little if I can.
Yes.
And I'd really like to tell you about our police and how much it's touched me and my family. I recently purchased 2 books, and I plan to purchase 2 more. I gave one to a nephew, and I showed it to my wife, and she took it in for her 2nd grade class, and she read it to them before the Thanksgiving break as a little treat. And the illustrations and the text, it's such a great visual aid for young kids today.
Joe, I want to thank you very much. Don't hang up. I want to give you a free copy as well. That's very, very kind of you. We'll be right back. Hello, everybody. Mark Levin here. This is Hour 2. Our number, 877-381-3811. 877-381-3811. There was this online survey. And online surveys are online surveys, but still. At the Fox News Insider, nearly half of young Americans believe U.S. is racist. Have you heard this? Some of you have, but not from me. And not greatest country survey finds. 47% favor socialism and future over capitalism. Now, I'm going to tell you something. We don't turn this around, we're over. The monopoly control of our colleges and universities, and I would argue many of our public schools, is now having a real-world effect. We have these tenured professors, most of whom are overpaid. Not all, but most. Dr. Kendor, don't write me. I know you're not, but others are. And there's propaganda. There's some exceptions. You know, you have Hillsdale, you have Grove City. There's just a handful. Some of the religious schools, the Christian schools, Liberty University. But all these state-supported universities and colleges really are abysmal. Absolutely abysmal. When you mix that with what you see on TV and what you hear on other radio, and then the crap that's in the books, and then you hear Obama say what he says and these other jerks say what they say, I don't even blame these kids. It's our generation doing it to them. And what's amazing about this in colleges and universities, we are going broke subsidizing this. And this is why Bernie Sanders wants free college for everybody. Trust me. If our colleges were reinforcing our founding principles, Bernie Sanders wouldn't support it, just like with open borders. If open borders resulted in capitalists, conservatives coming into this country, they would reject it. They're always result-oriented and justifies the means. So the survey conducted by polling firm YouGov, Y-O-U-Gov, reveals that many members of the younger generation, under 38, Generation Z and millennials, do not identify with patriotism or American exceptionalism. The Foundation for Liberty and American Greatness, which sponsored the survey, I don't know anything about the foundation, but we're going into these numbers, highlighted some key findings, including that 46% of respondents do not agree that America is the greatest country in the world. Half believe the country is sexist, 50%, racist, 49%, and 47% say America's future should be driven by socialism over capitalism. Other findings. 38% of younger Americans do not agree that America has a history that we should be proud of. You heard Obama the other day at the James A. Baker Center in Rice University. 1 in 8, 14% of millennials agree that America was never a great country and never will be. 46% of younger Americans agree that America is more racist than other countries. 84% of Americans do not know the specific rights enumerated in the First Amendment, because they're not even taught what's in the Bill of Rights. They're not even taught about the Constitution. All they're told is that the people who write it were slave owners and so forth. Excuse me. 19% of millennials believe the American flag is a sign of intolerance and hatred. 44% of younger Americans believe Barack Obama had a bigger impact on America than George Washington. Now that one got me. That Barack Obama had a bigger impact on America than George Washington. And you've got cities that want to lower the voting age. You've got individuals who want to subsidize all this sort of education. It's not education, it's indoctrination, it's propaganda. And by the way, in some sense, I'm a failure. I have to admit this. I wrote this book, Plunder and Deceit, to counter all this. But apparently people don't read anymore either. I wrote this book, Plunder and Deceit, to counter all this. And it was published in 2015. I explain to younger people how the left is destroying their future on the debt, how they're destroying Social Security and Medicare, how they're destroying education, running up their debt, what immigration does to individuals, not just those who graduate from college, but those who don't, what this radical environmental movement is doing to them, and how the push for a $15 minimum wage destroys any opportunity for getting at that starting step on the ladder, and how the attack on the Constitution is creating a society, a much more autocratic society that they should be concerned about. And what I called for then was a new civil rights movement. A new civil rights movement. Remember Ronald Reagan's farewell speech, January 11, 1989? It's online. And he encouraged what I called the rising generation to let them know and nail them on it. That is, to push back against teachers, professors, journalists, politicians, and others in the governing generation who manipulate and deceive them. We need to encourage our kids to do this. And informed patriotism is what we want. And are we doing a good enough job teaching our children what America is and what she should represent in the long history of the world? You know, ladies and gentlemen, we're not without recourse. These are our kids. Those of us who are over 35 or so years of age, this is Reagan, not me, grew up in a different America. We were taught very directly what it means to be an American. Now, he said this almost 30 years ago. And we absorbed almost in the air a love of country and an appreciation of its institutions. If you didn't get these things from your family, you got them from the neighborhood, from the father down the street who fought in Korea, or the family who lost someone at Anzio. Or you could get a sense of patriotism from school. And if all else failed, you could get a sense of patriotism from the popular culture. The movies celebrated democratic values and implicitly reinforced the idea that America was special. TV was like that, too, through the mid-1960s. But now, we're about to enter the 90s. as he said, and some things have changed. Younger parents aren't sure that an ambivalent appreciation of America is the right thing to teach modern children. And as for those who create the popular culture, well-grounded patriotism is no longer their style. Our spirit is back, but we haven't reinstitutionalized it. We've got to do a better job of getting across that America is freedom, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of enterprise, and freedom is special and rare. It's fragile. It needs protection. So we've got to teach history based not on what's in fashion, but what's important. Why the Pilgrims came here. Why Jimmy Doolittle was, who he was, rather, and what those 30 seconds over Tokyo meant. You know, 4 years ago on the 40th anniversary of D-Day, he said, I read a letter from a young woman writing to her late father, who'd fought on Omaha Beach. Her name was Lisa Zanata Hen. And she said, we will always remember, we will never forget what the boys of Normandy did. Well, let's help her keep her word. If we forget what we did, we won't know who we are. I'm warning of an eradication of the American memory that could result ultimately in an erosion of the American spirit. Let's start with some basics. More attention to American history and a greater emphasis on civic ritual. And let me offer lesson number 1 about America. All great change in America begins at the dinner table. So tomorrow night in the kitchen, I hope the talking begins. And children, if your parents haven't been teaching you what it means to be an American, let them know and nail them on it. That would be a very American thing to do. Almost 30 years ago, he was right on and he saw it. I'll be right back. Now, I could be wrong about this because it's hard for me to get into the mind of a leftist because it's so tight in there. You know, Mr. Producer? More bone than tissue. But nonetheless, why would the Democrats in the House want to impeach Trump when they know that he would not be removed by the Senate? To dirty him up, right? Now, I'm not saying they won't try. But if the more Machiavellian among them are able to control the mob, that is the Democrat majority soon in the House, they're going to say no. Just hang that threat over his head and just keep beating the guy up so we can defeat him for re-election. Doesn't that make more sense to you, Mr. Producer? I think it does. Because they know, I think, that there's a sleeping giant out there. And while their side is all revved up through race baiting, income baiting, sex baiting, whatever baiting, our side, that is not their side, I'd say is quasi-revved up, as shown in the midterm elections. So I actually believe that much like the Kavanaugh matter, if they go through the impeachment process based on this crap, they may get their base all excited. But I also think they're going to do significant damage. And I think, and I could be wrong, that Pelosi gets that, even though she can't speak anymore. Her loosening dentures and all the rest. Because to me, politically, it's more in their interest to use whatever report the Soviet prosecutor comes up with. That's what I'm going to call him for now. And the Soviet prosecutor Mueller comes up with, to just keep using it for hearings and beating him over the head and so forth and so on, rather than bang their heads against the wall. I could be wrong. It's not a prediction. I've just been thinking this out. Just trying to figure out what they may or may not do. John, Manteca, California, Sirius Satellite. Go right ahead.
Yeah, sir, you're the master, and I was just looking for your opinion on 2 thoughts. One is, if the information for the FISA warrant is believed to be manufactured or falsified, wouldn't anything downstream be fruits of the poisonous tree? And 2, those agents involved... All right,
let's stop 1 second. This phrase, fruit from the poisonous tree, comes out of a Supreme Court case, the Miranda case. If you don't read a suspect their rights, then everything that flows from that is thrown out. So it can be expanded. Hold on one second. It can be expanded somewhat, but I don't think it would be expanded to include FISA court warrants. So to answer your question, I don't think so. That's number one. Number two, who's going to rule that way?
True.
The whole thing is a fix right now.
Well, my second part then has a possibility is under Bivens, a federal tort claim against those agents that may have falsified the information and harmed the individuals they went after. Would that be a possibility?
Bivens is a very interesting case where if, let's say, an FBI agent or DE agent or whomever it is breaks the law, does the citizen or the target or whomever have a right to sue that individual personally? And the answer is yes. But again, it depends on the factors and it depends on the circumstances. The problem with all this is you have the institution of the Department of Justice, which unfortunately gives this the patina of legitimacy. I'm not opposed to those lawsuits being filed. I had understood Corsi was thinking of bringing some kind of case and so forth, but you need to understand that we've got a lot of judges, and a lot of judges who think this is just swell, like the Manafort judges. They have no problem with this guy sitting in solitary confinement every night as if he's a political prisoner. So that's the problem. While people have ideas on what to do, the fact is, I think we're in a tough position.
Yeah.
All right, my friend. Excellent call. Let's continue. Brent, Iowa City, Iowa, on the Mark Levin app. Go ahead, please.
Mark, thanks for taking my call. It's great talking to you, sir.
You bet, sir.
Back to your point on the issue with the children and the way the schools have indoctrinated them. One way our family fights that cesspool is we actually homeschool our children, and that allows us to teach about the real truths and the greatness of how this country was founded.
Mm-hmm. All right. The problem is the vast majority of people don't. So we got to figure out how to address these government schools.
Yeah, and I tell you what, we've got a great homeschool program here in Iowa, and families are really dedicated to raising their children. And it's the parents' responsibility. Mm-hmm. We've got to step forward, and we've got to fight for our children. And if we fail to do that, we're failing our children.
I agree. And even if you send your kids to one of these government schools or colleges or universities, when they come home, you got to talk to them.
Yep, that's exactly
got to talk
right.
to them and explain things to them. We did it with our kids.
Well, and unfortunately, many families are sending both parents to work, and they come home, they're exhausted, and they don't have the energy to do that. And they send
I don't generalize. I don't know. I think some people just want to leave it to the school system, and that's a mistake. You should never be too tired for your kids, period. All right, Brent, I appreciate your call, my friend. We're moving all over the country. Let's go to Brian, Boston, Massachusetts, XM Satellite. How are you?
Hey, Mark, I love your show, and I love your TV show on Fox Network on Sundays.
Thank you, sir.
I was just commenting on the Hillary Clinton investigation, and you had mentioned the top aides, almost to a one, got immunity. And I wanted to point out, as a former Suffolk County DA in Boston, how unusual that is. Normally you give people immunity for the purpose of going after the big fish. And my recollection is there was no big fish, and there was no real prosecution that came out of any of that.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think you're right. Now what do you do?
I don't know, but it seems to be the same cast of characters that are now going after Trump that did that play, basically, eliminating all those witnesses with no results.
Let me ask you a question. You're Robert Mueller, and you hire 16 or 17 people, and you don't even attempt to show nonpartisanship in your hires or bipartisanship in your hires. Almost to a person, they're Democrats. Almost to a person, they've donated to Obama or Clinton. Some of them even worse. Their number 2 guy who has severe ethical issues, has been reprimanded by more than one court, and was at the Hillary Clinton victory party. And that's perfectly fine. And you know damn well if this were a special counsel investigating a Democrat and somebody had been in a Donald Trump victory party and had donated to the Bushes or the Reagans or the Trumps, we'd never hear the end of it.
I think what we're witnessing, Mark, unfortunately, is we're turning this country into a banana republic.
I agree. I agree, Brian. We'll be right back. There's one other document I have. Maybe I've mentioned it before here. Maybe not. I have a document. It's a letter. It's a plea. And on 2 sides of this document, it's very old, was written in 1775, is a plea to the New York Assembly for gunpowder by, among others, guess who, Mr. Producer? Dr. Joseph Warren. Who'd you say? Chuck Schumer? No. He would have a request for hair plugs for men. Anyway, 1775, so Dr. Joseph Warren. And you know, I've talked about him before. You can Google his name. Dr. Joseph Warren was the most consequential early revolutionary. The most consequential. And he was killed early in the revolution, really before the official declaration of a revolution. But the revolution really began in 1775. Some would even date it earlier than that. And so this plea went out for more gunpowder because they knew they were going to be confronting the Redcoats, the British. And these colonists, the Massachusetts colonists, took up position up on the hill, Bunker Hill. But there was a lower hill right next to it called Breed's Hill. And Breed's Hill was where the brunt of the action took place. And what happened there is that the Redcoats charged the hill. They were pushed back by the colonial militia. They took great casualties. They rushed the hill again. They took great casualties again. They organized and made another run at the hill. And the colonial militia ran out of gunpowder. It's thought that New York needed the gunpowder too, because it was clear that this battle was widening. And Joseph Warren, I believe, was about 36 years old. And that last push by the British wanted him dead. He had a price on his head. Sam Adams, others, as you know, Hancock, started right there in Boston. But Warren really was the leader. And they ran out of gunpowder, and he wouldn't fall back. Even though he was the equivalent of a general for the militia back then, he would not fall back. Pulled out his sword, and he fought. And he was effectively executed. He was shot between the eyes. And the British butchered his body, urinated on his body, and left it there. After the battle was over and the British moved on, Paul Revere, who had actually worked under Dr. Joseph Warren at this point, was able to identify him because, as you know, Paul Revere was a blacksmith. And Paul Revere had replaced one or more of his teeth in the past, and he could tell his work, and he could tell that that was Joseph Warren. So this document which none of the people on the online survey will have no knowledge about. They'll never know about Joseph Warren. They'll never know about Breeds Hill or Bunkers Hill. They'll never know about Lexington and Concord. They don't know and they don't care. Neither does Obama. Nobody on the left really gives a damn, but we do. Very much. And by the way, Joseph Warren was not a slaveholder. None of these men were. And he gave his life at a very early age. And so when you have these kids online telling you that Obama is more important to America than George Washington, and that's what happens when you have a President's Day as opposed to a George Washington birthday and a Lincoln birthday and a Martin Luther King birthday. That's what happens when you dumb down history. Or worse, when you rewrite history. I would ask you, how many of you were ever taught about Dr. Joseph Warren, other than hearing it from me? Were you, Mr. Producer? No. Were you, Mr. Call Screener? No. Most of the history I have learned, I learned on my own. My own homeschooling. Through self-education. Just because you leave school doesn't mean that's it. Matter of fact, you need to learn on your own because you don't know if what you've been taught is actually truthful. But I dare say, not all, but most of the history or social study teachers in this country never heard of Dr. Joseph Warren. And I dare say most history professors either don't know about him or want to keep him quiet. The American Revolution was not started by slave owners. Started by men who wanted their liberty and independence. A number of acts that were imposed on them by the British Crown. And the one law that really pushed them over the top was the Stamp Act. That was the final straw. That was the final straw. I doubt Jake Tapper, Don Lemon, Wolf Blitzer, any of those fools even know what I'm talking about. Rachel Maddow, Chris Matthews, and furthermore, that any of those fools know what I'm talking about. For all these folks, history begins today, and you rewrite history to accommodate what it is that you want to accomplish politically. Anyway, so I've donated this document today to our friends at Hillsdale College. Why do I donate these documents to Hillsdale College? First of all, they have the Kirby Constitution Center in Washington, D.C. on Massachusetts Avenue. They have a Constitution Center in Washington, D.C. Is there another Constitution Center in Washington, D.C.? You might say the National Archives, but I'm talking about any private entity. Is there another Constitution Center in Washington, D.C.? Well, there's one in Philadelphia. I understand that. But this is a private entity. A private entity. And so, over the next several weeks or months, they will prepare the appropriate security of the document, because there's only one. If something happens to that, there won't be another one. And I can't do this forever, because it's very expensive, but the bound copy of the Federalist Papers, what I believe to be is the finest bound copy of the Federalist Papers, Alexander Hamilton had 500 published, which was extremely expensive. And he published them because New York was leaning against ratifying the Constitution. And in a relatively desperate move, he had 500 bound copies of the Federalist Papers. Turns out he gave 50 copies to Virginia, because they were having a hell of a time too. Patrick Henry, George Mason, among others, were opposed to it. They didn't think it protected individuals enough. And there were other areas of weakness in terms of support. But that is also at Hillsdale College in a secure area, beautifully protected. And so my wife Julie and I have donated this latest document that I think is crucially important. I don't want a pat on the head. I want you to go visit this place. I watch this show, American Pickers. You guys ever watch this show? I am obsessed with this show. It's great on the History Channel. And I watch it all the time to the point where my wife is really sick of it. But I love it. I watch reruns of the show. And I'm really into these historical things. And what Mike on that show likes to say is, I want to put something where it belongs. You know what? The finest copy of the Federalist Papers, the bound copy that's known to exist, belongs at Hillsdale at their Kirby Constitution Center. This letter, where Joseph Warren and two other men were basically begging for gunpowder to defend themselves and fend off the British, is so historical, so important, that it also belongs at the Kirby Constitution Center for Hillsdale College. And one day, if you get a chance to come to Washington, D.C., you ought to give them a call or contact them and make sure you visit them. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
These are power-hungry munchkins, mental midgets, who are using the law to destroy the law. Are they using the law to commit crimes against humanity, as far as I'm concerned, destroying individuals, destroying their families with these preposterous, idiotic indictments? They can go shove it. I'll be right back. Hello, everybody. Mark Levin here. Our number, 877-381-3811, 877-381-3811. How is it that James Clapper was never prosecuted for perjury? This idiot Republican who runs the Senate Intelligence Committee, this guy Richard Burr, he says, you know, this shows people that you can't lie to Congress. No, it doesn't. As I said before, Comey lied too. A number of them have lied. And none of them have been prosecuted. None of them. Well, why is that? All right, anyway, this guy Adam Schiff, I'm listening to the news at the top of the hour, and it is horrible. They quote Adam Schiff. They have an audio of Adam Schiff. Then they have an audio of Schumer about the president. And Adam Schiff says, obviously, if Michael Cohen was lying about his knowledge involving Russia, then of course Trump was too. I mean, what kind of a moron is this? And yet the media run with this. This is why this country's in such bad shape, quite frankly. The media more than anything else. All right. I'm looking here, Mr. Producer. I don't want to upset all the people. Here we have a former FBI agent by the name of Asha Rangapapa. Asha Rangapapa, I believe. And she's on at Mediaite. Any halfwit who attacks Trump, Mediaite, will put the clip right up there. That's our boy Dan Abrams. And by the way, Dan, and I mean this with all sincerity, you have the best toupee I've ever seen. Doesn't he, Mr. Producer? You cannot tell where his real hair ends and the fake hair begins. You cannot. And he shouldn't just start these various media outlets. He should start his own hair club for men. And for women, I guess. Asha Rangapapa, or something. Former FBI agent. Now, there's a zillion former FBI agents, so you know they cherry pick here, right? At CNN. And by the way, CNN fired this guy, Mark Lamont Hill. You know, we pounded on him yesterday, and I want to thank Phil Klein and the Free Beacon, Conservative Review, for exposing this guy and bringing it to my attention. So we hammered him yesterday, and now he's out, which is really quite surprising. Because I explained at length yesterday how the left more and more embraces anti-Semitism. But I won't do that again. We already did it. Asha Rangapapa, former FBI agent. Why do we care what she says? We really don't. But she's on CNN, so it must be important. Cut 12, go.
Yes, the president has very broad pardon power. He could pardon Manafort, but dangling a pardon is something different. It is offering to use your presidential power in order to encourage or entice or influence somebody's behavior. That is a separate act, and that can also be evidence of obstruction.
You're such an idiot. So you're a former FBI agent and you know the Constitution? This can be, that's right, She said it. She's an authority. Who the hell is she? The pardon power is in the Constitution. The president doesn't have to dangle anything. Then we have Rachel Maddow. Dumb as dumb can be on MSLSD last night. Let's listen to what she has to say. Cut 13, go.
Within the last 24 hours, we now have new evidence that the president, definitely, this is confirmed, uncontested.
Yes, what?
He has another ongoing source of information from inside the Mueller investigation.
Well, now stop. Another? You mean he has more than one? Wow. I wonder what she means. Everybody knows if you want to get the news, you watch Rachel Maddow. Go ahead.
Former campaign chairman, Paul Manafort. This revelation that his former campaign chairman, who was supposedly cooperating, instead has been effectively functioning as a spy.
Oh, a spy! I remember the day when left-wing kooks used to really question prosecutors in big government. Don't you, folks? But not now. They're all in. The Sovietization, may I coin a word, the Sovietization of the left, of the media left, is apparent for all to see. It's called a joint defense agreement, dummy. They're not spies. You see, defendants or subjects or targets, they get to defend themselves in our country. They get to defend themselves under our Bill of Rights. It's not just Mueller who can go looking everywhere and talking to everybody. They get to also. What? That's true. Go ahead.
Inside the prosecution. That is obviously blowing up the criminal case that involves Paul Manafort. But it also means the president and his legal team are now admitting out loud in public that they are colluding with a convicted
felon. All right, dummy. A joint defense agreement is not collusion. It's the provision of information in order to properly represent your client. If these lawyers hadn't done what they're doing, they wouldn't be doing their jobs. Now, I know you'll push to the end of the earth to defend terrorists. I know you'll push to the end of the earth to defend MS-13. I know you'll push to the end of the earth to defend anybody who's not an American citizen who happens to touch foot in the United States. I know. But the President of the United States actually gets to defend himself. Oh, my goodness. And so does his former campaign chairman. They really do. They really do over there at the Soviet MSLSD. Go ahead.
To surreptitiously gain
Shut up, you
intelligence.
idiot. I shouldn't. What am I giving this woman even attention for? Let's move on. This is kind of monotonous, isn't it? I've already told you. Here's the bottom line. You don't have to listen to a single so-called legal or constitutional expert the rest of the night. Here's the bottom line. The president, I'm doing this for the left. Follow the bouncing ball. The president is not in legal jeopardy. All right? That's it. Now, Jim Sciutto. Got to be careful because you could mispronounce that name and be thrown off the air. Jim Sciutto is an Obama hack who used to work at CNN. Then he became an Obama hack, and now he's back at CNN. And he is, of course, an objective reporter defending freedom of the press. And he's incredibly smart. The guy, you know, he used to be, I think, the chief of staff to the ambassador of whatever, Guam, I don't know. Just kidding. New Guinea? I don't know. I know Guam's a territory. It's a joke. So anyway, here he is on global warming because the man's an expert. As a matter of fact, all the clowns, all the news people on CNN are experts on global warming, climate change. Just ask them. Listen to this one, though. Cut 16, go.
The president also either deliberately or mistakenly messes up the distinction between a clean environment and a warming environment. He keeps saying, well, we have record clean environment, doesn't get to the temperature issue. But I just want to ask you a question for folks at home, folks like us. We got kids. We don't want to be, slowly burned to death on our own planet here.
Whoa, slowly burned to death on our own planet here. Now, do you have to be in negative IQ territory to work at CNN? This guy's dumber than Don Lemon. He's dumber than Wolf Blitzer. Go ahead.
Is the human race, in the simplest terms, running out of time to take the measures necessary to rein in this rise in global temperatures?
Yes, we are. We're running out of time. So here's my recommendation. All you leftists, get under your desks, put your hands over your heads, and stay there. Because I think we're running out of time. I think the earth is slowly burning up, and your children are going to burn up too, and your grandchildren. Because this is what happens every 100 years in the country. Every 100 years. Now, folks, we have no idea what's going to happen in 100 years with technology. No idea whatsoever. As I said the other day, 100 years ago, they had no idea what would happen 100 years hence. None. These people are absolutely dim-witted. Well, there's got to be, I believe there's climate change. Well, okay, so what? It's not like the climate is going to stay static at this one specific best point forever. Well, I believe man has some contribution to it. No, he doesn't. 36 million Earths fit in the sun. I think the sun might have something to do with it. But the automobile has nothing to do with it. It can create, fog and smog and that sort of. But no, there's a lot of other factors. Go, folks, the great thing about the internet, one of them, is you can inform yourselves. Seriously. There's some very brilliant men and women who've looked at this. Thousands of them. And I understand it's not politically correct, even for conservatives, to say, look, I know the climate changes. I'm sure man has some contribution. But what's the solution? What's the solution? So they give up the entire playing field to the hardcore left. You need to understand that this was an ideologically based policy. 40 years ago, out of Europe. Like so much out of Europe. And they've been pushing this, and here we are. What are you, a denier? Denier. Well, I want to raise this. Oh, no, you're a denier. You don't even admit that there's science out there. And then there's Al Gore. Now, Al Gore, I used to say Joe Biden was the dumbest vice president in American history. I can't do that anymore. I think he's the second dumbest in American history. I think Al Gore really is. Al Gore, I think, is really the dumbest. And boy, is he ballooned up. And his methane must, cut 17, go.
It's really significant, Trevor.
Yes.
That
So he's on the Daily Show on the Comedy Network. Now, if you want to get information about science and knowledge and philosophy and so forth, go to the Comedy Network and go to Trevor. Go to Trevor. Go ahead.
It's really significant, Trevor, that Donald J. Trump is now the face of climate denial. And there are those who are still giving him their loyalty and trust, and I get that, believe me, but the vast majority of Americans, not to mention all around the world, are really they've had it with the constant craziness, if you want to call it that way.
I think we do want to call it that way.
And when he's the principal global face of climate denial, I think that's a cue. In physics, there's this well-known principle: for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction.
Right.
I think that some of the mobilization that is really building, we saw it in the election 3 weeks ago with the blue wave. I think part of that is a reaction to what Donald Trump is saying and doing. We are treating the atmosphere as an open sewer. It's a very thin shell around the planet, and we're changing it dramatically by dumping 110 million tons of man-made heat-trapping global warming pollution into it every day. The cumulative amount now traps as much extra heat energy every day as would be released by 500,000 Hiroshima-class atomic bombs exploding every 24 hours. It's a big planet, but that is an enormous amount of energy. That's why the temperatures are going up, the water cycle's being disrupted, and the fires. Look at the fires in California just recently. In South Africa, Cape Town almost ran out of water.
What are the Kenny-Gadifanil, the ghost track?
They have an it costs they just gave them
with the withdraw, bringing U.S. home troops from home,
and the
you need somebody.
Wait, so finally
budget, but resist we must, and we will much about that be committed.
I'm a warrior.
That it was. Did
I mean, they said that.
Look, the
was it him? Why? I didn't. If we, Mark Levin.
The great minds and scientists, engineers, physicists of the past, Pasteur, Einstein. Now we have Al Gore. Because they politicize everything. Everything has to be laundered through the progressive ideology. And that's what we're talking about here. All right. Let's take a few calls, shall we? Wait a minute. I got a sudden Washington Post. By the way, how do you get rid of a Washington Post app? The damn thing is popping all the time. And the first word in 90% of their little app pops is Trump. Trump emerges as a central subject of special counsel's investigation and documents revealed this week. I thought he was a central subject anyway. I mean, I didn't think, of course he was a central subject, but what's the point? We all know what's going on here. Washington Post is giddy. Absolutely giddy. And you know what? This guy Bezos that owns Amazon and owns the Washington Post, all these Democrat metropolitan areas subsidize this guy. New York City, subsidize the guy. Arlington, Virginia, Democrat, subsidize the guy. Subsidize a guy who's worth $90 billion. But we're for the people. We're for the little people. All right, let's go here. Kate, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, my hometown, the great WPHT. How are you?
Hi, Mark. Oh, my gosh, it's such an honor to speak to you.
Thank you.
I wanted to call because I heard that you were reading off these statistics and these survey answers from millennials and their feelings on the current state of America, the world, and it's so disheartening for me to hear these things. And I just wanted to reach out to you and tell you that, you should still have some faith in the millennial generation. I am a millennial. I'm probably an older millennial. I'm about 33. And I've been listening to you since, I guess, 2005, 2004. And I was in college, and I can remember reading Men in Black, and it's still one of my favorite books.
Thank you.
And at this point, I am an attorney who practices a lot of constitutional law litigation, and I can remember a time when I was in law school, and I took the things that I learned from Men in Black, and I was able to, kind of go toe-to-toe with my constitutional law professor, who, of course, was so left-wing, it was outrageous. And I just wanted
what
to
law
tell
school,
you,
by the way?
I went to Widener Law in Delaware.
Very good.
Law school in Delaware.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so, I mean, I had a great time in law school, and it was such a learning experience. And, you know, I loved, as a natural contrarian and kind of cage rattler, right? I loved taking these courses.
Oh, I wish I could listen to you more, but I have to go. I apologize, Kate, but thank you. You made my day. Thank you. John, Ann Arbor, Michigan, XM Satellite. Go.
Hey, Mark. So earlier in the show, you were talking about the media and universities and public schools are kind of deinstitutionalizing patriotism. So it got me thinking about what I can do from more of a grassroots perspective, and how to kind of change the dialogue and get people to think about it from a different perspective. And I came up with the idea that I'm going to buy 3 of your books, whether it be Liberty and Tyranny, 100 in the Sea, or Rediscovering Americanism. I'm going to give them out as gifts to a few of my classmates at grad school and kind of let them come to these topics from a different perspective from what they're normally used to hearing it from.
Now, you're not my son or nephew, correct?
No, I'm not.
But I'll tell you what, John, that's really a great idea. And instead of you buying them, because you're going to put it to such good use, Mr. Producer, let's give him one of each of those books. Do we still have them? One of each of those books, John, and you can make the case.
And if I may say one more thing, I think it's a good idea that all your listeners can replicate. Just buying a book or two, it can be $15-20, and it can go a long way in starting up the dialogue and getting people focused on the issues that matter, rather than a lot of the BS that the media like to focus on all the time. It's really about liberties and the policies you go over in your books.
Thanks, John. Don't hang up. Thanks, John. And folks, I want you to know something. Every now and then a detractor will say something on the internet or something like, Mark Levin writes his books for money. Let me tell you something. It's the hardest way to make a buck you can possibly imagine. There's a lot easier ways to make money. Writing a book takes a lot of time away from your family, a lot of time away from, in my case, our doggies, just a lot of time away from a lot of things. Because if you really write your own book and do your own research and try and lay out your own arguments and double and triple check yourself, it's not a quick enterprise. It could take a year, it could take 18 months. Most of my books take 12 to 16 months. I don't want to waste my time, and I don't want to waste your money when I write a book. So there's a lot easier ways for somebody like me to make money than writing a book. Now, why do I write books then? Because it's a different format altogether. From TV, whether it's cable, TV, whether it's digital, or radio. People want to sit down and really concentrate on an issue, or really concentrate on an idea. You'll find that often, typically, in a book. So that's why I write these books. And you've heard a lot of young people call today. I haven't encouraged them to call, they just do. Telling you and me what kind of an effect Men in Black has, or Liberty and Tyranny, or Plunder and Deceit, and so forth. And let me tell you something. That's a big deal to me, to an author like me. It really is, that something like that has an effect on somebody. Because writing, at least the way I do it, is a very solitary thing. It's a very solitary thing. And I'm working on a new book now, and it just takes a while to do it. I'm not even going to mention the subject because, we got the backbenchers, and I don't want to deal with them right now. So I want to thank that gentleman. He didn't hang up, did he? We're going to get him the books? All right, good. All right. Let us go to Jim, Henderson, Nevada, the great KDWN, KDWN. Go.
Hi, yes, geographically Henderson, Nevada, but I actually find myself walking in Bob Mueller's Wonderland.
Well,
a couple of things.
Everybody has to have a hobby.
Well, yeah, it's kind of exhausting. A couple of things came up when I was on hold, so quickly, parenthetically. It sounds, according to your clips, like it's all right for a prosecutor to dangle incarceration as a means of motivating lying, but it's not all right for a president to dangle pardoning as a means of motivating truth.
That's actually a great point. That is a great point. And it really is. And really, the president doesn't even have to dangle it. They know he has the power to pardon. But you're right. Isn't it interesting that they don't... It doesn't faze them one bit when Mueller threatens people, indicts people, forces them to plead to some cockamamie crime, false statements. It's so simple to get somebody on a false statement. And yet, when the president said, and all the president said is, I'm not taking it off the table. Yeah. So he's not even dangling it. But you're right on. That's a great point, Jim.
Okay, and also parenthetically, I am in complete agreement with one of your previous callers who thinks the Mueller investigation is a misdirection. I think I know what it's a misdirection for, and I absolutely agree with her.
Well, tell us.
Okay, in the most general terms, I'll tell you generally and specifically. In the most general terms, I think it's covered by the word plunder in your book title. Mm-hmm. And specifically, for specific examples, there's Peter Schweitzer's book where he shows how the pro-plunder coalition is actually the anti-Trump coalition is antithesis. Oh, I can use that term, antithesis. I'm a Marxist.
All right, my friend. Thanks for your call. He's a very clever guy. All right, let us go to Lee, Columbia, Missouri, the Show Me State, on the Mark Levin app. How are you?
Okay, thank you for taking my call, sir.
You got it.
My question, and I don't want to sound too controversial out there, but it's something that people will have to discuss. Is there ever a time, are we in a time when the Constitution has become a suicide pact? It looks like the side that generally upholds it, is losing. They always lose, while the other side that opposes it, Democrats or whatever, they seem to win. I always remember John Adams' statement about a moral and religious people. That there could come a time when the Constitution is simply not adequate.
No, I don't think so. I think the problem is those who defy it and undermine it and are working to eviscerate it. And then there are those who are trying to reinstitute it. And lots of aspects of the Constitution have been eviscerated. And you're talking about a strategy as opposed to the Constitution itself. And in that, I agree with you. That is, I'm tired of us rolling over to the left. I'm tired of us rolling over for these people. You listen to this show. You know I don't roll over. You know I don't give an inch. You know I explain myself. You know I go back to history and principles and all the rest of it. And if more of us would do that in our personal lives, and if more of us would do that in our public places, work and so forth, it could have a very positive effect. We're a big army out here. There's 60-some million people who voted for Trump. There's tens of millions of people who identify as conservatives and constitutionalists. We just got to make our case. The problem is we've never really faced anything like this, where the where the institutions of the civil society have been effectively devoured in many respects by people who don't embrace the civil society. That is, they will use liberty and the liberty that's provided for in the Constitution in order to destroy liberty. And it can get more complicated than that. I'll tell you what, sir, I'm going to send you a copy of Rediscovering Americanism and the Tyranny of Progressivism, okay?
I appreciate that, but may I make one more statement?
Well, I got to go. No offense. Don't hang up. I'll send you that. All right. George, Parkville, Maryland. I want to give everyone a shot. The great WMAL. Go.
Morning, Mr. Levin.
Hello.
I'd like to share a quick story. I agree totally what you were saying about history not being taught to our children. So my dad was the youngest of 3 sons. His oldest brother fought in the South Pacific with the U.S. Air Force. His middle brother fought with the Army under George Patton. When he graduated high school, he fell under the clause that did not allow him to join the military due to he was the last surviving son. Instead, he joined the Merchant Marines.
Right. We're coming up to a break.
He had to support the war effort.
Right.
Children today, millennials, have not been taught what that was about.
See, I think there's at least a division I don't even like the word millennials, among younger people, at least multiple divisions, but at least a division. Those men and women who are in uniform in Afghanistan, in Syria, in Iraq, and one hellhole after another all over the world, they are volunteers. That's the younger generation. I don't think we focus on them enough. I don't think we promote them enough. I do agree that there's way too much indoctrination that's taking place, which is why I brought up that survey before, and that needs to be fought. But I cannot condemn the younger generation for what our generation has created. The modern college and university and the monopoly ideology, we created that. Somehow we let that happen. The current government school system, which does not teach about such great American heroes as Joseph Warren, we keep funding that system. We send our kids into these systems. We take out student loans into these systems. We pay to go to college. Oh, look at that. They got into this school and that school. So I can't really blame the younger people for what goes on in the classroom, because most of those professors and those administrators are in our generation. All right, we'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
Who the hell can do a show like this while suffering with the flu during the breaks? Seriously. No, I'm not bragging. I'm just saying I got to do, the show must go on. Let us continue, should we? I think we shall. Michael, Denver, Colorado, XM Satellite. Go ahead.
Yeah, so anyways, Mark, just first thing I want to say, I watch you on CRTV, and it is spectacular.
Thank you.
So, and second thing I just want to tell you about, I'm a millennial. Sadly, I just mass argue with everybody on Facebook that's my age about political stuff. But I just want to tell you about my college experience. I went to a business school out here in Colorado, University of Colorado at Denver.
Yeah.
And I just remember I had multiple socialist college professors in the business school.
Yeah.
And I just remembered, one of them said something about, how if you are going to succeed in this country, it has nothing to do with your skill set or what you know or how hard you work. It's only based on who you know.
You sure it wasn't Obama?
I don't know. It's just some socialist guy, long hair. But
I'm close.
And it's just like you have some other guys, like some of these kids, they don't even know the difference between socialism and capitalism. And I remember some of them were like, oh, well, Scandinavia, that's socialism. And it's like, it scores very high.
First of all, how many of them been into Scandinavia? Do they even know that Scandinavia is a grouping of countries? Do they even know that?
No, I mean, it's a bunch of dumb people. I mean, it's a bunch of people that are too lazy to go out and do their own homework. Mm-hmm. They just are spoon-fed information and don't double-check it.
I can tell you enjoyed your experience.
I'm sorry, what?
I can tell you enjoyed your experience.
Well, I went from an A student to a B student real quick, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, because they probably graded on a bell curve. Conservatives are on the downslope. All right, my friend, thank you for your information. We appreciate it. Let us go to Mike, St. Paul, Minnesota, XM Satellite. Go right ahead.
Hi, Mark. I wanted to say, first of all, that the way the federal judiciary operates, it's in need of fixing. And I appreciate everything that you say to expose what's wrong with it. I even thank Mr. Mueller for doing what he's doing, because he's raising a consciousness about what needs to be fixed. I wish there was a Judicial Accountability Act on the table which would correct the federal judiciary. When I go to work, when you go to work, when we all go to work, we have a boss. Federal judges really don't have a boss. Mm-hmm. They're like gods. I mean, there are federal laws that allow you to make
there's a lot of truth to that. When a politically oriented plaintiff form shops a case in San Francisco District Court under the Ninth Circuit, and the Chief Justice of the United States says there's really no difference between these judges and these circuits, which is a bald-faced lie. And when that particular federal district judge in San Francisco can issue a temporary restraining order, even an injunction, for the entire nation, something is wrong. Because I can guarantee you no constitution that had that in it, or even conceived of such a thing, would have been ratified in Philadelphia, adopted in Philadelphia, ratified by any state.
I have a question for you.
I'm almost out of time.
All right, real quickly, do you think that there should be a law that prohibits U.S. attorneys from becoming federal judges? And if so, why?
No, I think everybody should be judged on the merits. I really do. There's been some great U.S. attorneys that I've worked with over the years. There have been some really lousy ones, like this guy Priet, what's-his-face, up there in the Southern District of New York. He was a hack. Comey was a hack. So there's a lot of hacks. That's a problem, too. Bahara. Excuse me, something's in my throat. All right, we salute our armed forces, police officers, firefighters, and emergency personnel. I'll see you tomorrow, America. Be well. Take care.